We are anonymous. No faces, no flags, no permission slips. You know us. We speak for the people. We speak for reality. And today we're talking about something huge. USA Olympic athletes trash Trump on the world stage. Now, I'm a huge fan of the Olympics. I always have been. I grew up watching those moments that define not just sport, but the soul of a nation. I think back to 1968 and 1972, the glory and the tragedy. Mark Spitz's blazing swim races and the Israeli team being killed. I remember 1980, the boycott, and then the miracle on ice, where underdogs became legends. The Olympics are supposed to mean something. Deep unity, excellence, courage. But right now, at the 2026 Milan Cortina Winter Games, those ideals are colliding with something very ugly. Because this year, for the first time in a long while, American athletes aren't just competing. They are speaking truth on the global stage. And what they're saying is shaking the foundations of the so-called greatest nation on earth. It started at a routine press conference when U.S. freestyle skier Hunter Hess was asked how it felt to represent the United States right now. And Hunter didn't mince words. He said it gave him mixed emotions, that wearing the flag doesn't mean he represents every policy or action coming out of Washington. He said he competes for his friends, his family, and the people who actually stood for what's right, not the political machine that's driving America into shame. Now get this. Instead of showing support for his honesty, Donald Trump, former president and commander-in-chief of this deeply divided republic, took to his social platform and called him a real loser. He blasted Hunter on Truth Social, saying that if he didn't want to represent the country, he shouldn't have tried out for Team USA, and that it's very hard to root for someone like this. Think about that. In the eyes of Trump, a man who constantly boasts about himself, refuses to serve, and insults the very people who defend this nation, standing up and speaking honestly, is traitorous. But the athletes didn't stop there. They doubled down. Chris Lillis, another Team USA skier, spoke openly about being heartbroken over what's happening in America, especially the brutal immigration enforcement actions back home, and insisted that what they want to represent is an America that respects everyone's rights and treats all its citizens with dignity. And then there's Amber Glenn, the figure skater, who is one of the first openly LGBTQ+ athletes to compete at these games. She didn't shy away from condemning the Trump administration's attacks on LGBTQ rights, calling the climate for her community under this presidency nothing short of a struggle for human rights. That's right. These champions people, who have trained their entire lives to represent the United States of America, aren't just there to chase medals. They are using their Olympic platform to call out the very leadership that claim to be protecting the nation's image. They are telling the world that the America they represent is one of inclusivity, compassion, respect, not cruelty, bigotry, and fear. Meanwhile, Trump retaliates not with leadership, not with pride in his country's athletes, but with insults. A grown man lashing out at a 20-something Olympic competitor on social media, calling him a loser instead of leading this nation with dignity, is not just pathetic, it's shameful. This moment right now, on the world's biggest stage, is exposing what so many of us already know. American values are under assault, and the people who embody the highest aspirations of this nation are being forced to distance themselves from a political leadership that has betrayed those ideals. The Olympic creed says it best. The most important thing is not to win, but to take part. But what's happening now is that these athletes are taking part in something bigger than sport. They are redefining what it means to truly represent America. A place not of hollow slogans, but of deep conviction. And they're doing it in front of the eyes of the world. So here's your call to action. Share this video. Don't let these voices be drowned out by Trump's lies and attacks. Support the athletes who speak truth, who value human dignity, who refuse to let a toxic ideology hijack what it means to be American. It's time to choose values over vanity, courage over cowardice, and substance over spin. Stand with truth, stand with real America, and spread the word. We are the reminder that power answers to people, not the other way around. When athletes speak truth instead of slogans, when courage shows up in ski boots and skates instead of suits, when the world is watching and America cannot hide, we are there. Trump wants silence. He wants obedience. He wants fear dressed up as patriotism. But the world just saw something different. They saw Americans who refused to lie for power. They saw strength without cruelty. They saw dignity without permission. This is bigger than sports. This is bigger than one man. This is about who gets to define America when the cameras are on and the lies stop working. Here's what's been going down in the last 24 to 48 hours and why Donald Trump and his machine look like they're in full-blown containment mode. First, the deletion. Multiple outlets have documented that files on the Justice Department's public Epstein page have disappeared after being posted without a clear public explanation at the time, including items involving Trump. And now the most explosive piece, an 86 pages prosecution memo dated December 19th, 2019, about the investigation into potential co-conspirators of Jeffrey Epstein. Major reporting confirms that such a memo exists and was part of the recently released materials. According to the reporting and the document descriptions discussed publicly, this memo was essentially the Justice Department's internal roadmap after Epstein was indicted on July 2nd, 2019. A detailed rundown of investigative steps and an analysis of whether Epstein's associates and employees may or may not be criminally liable. The memo is stamped with the kind of language that's always used to hide uncomfortable truths, privileged attorney work product, deliberative process, and references to grand jury secrecy. But here's the part that should make your blood run cold. It allegedly contained a list of possible co-conspirators and victim allegations tied to those possible co-conspirators, and then it disappeared from public access after scrutiny intensified, according to the Midas Touch Network's reporting about the document being removed and preserved elsewhere. If you're asking, why would they yank a memo like that? Look around at the broader fight over Epstein transparency. Even mainstream coverage has emphasized that the release has been heavily redacted, criticized as incomplete, and politically explosive, with lawmakers pointing to missing or obscured material. And yes, the government has claimed redactions are about privacy and legal constraints, while critics argue the blackouts go far beyond protecting victims. That tension between we're protecting victims and we're protecting powerful people is the whole battlefield. Now let's talk about the intimidation tactics happening at the same time, because the pattern is always the same. Erase the evidence, silence the dissent, smear the watchdogs. On February 6th in Oldham County, Kentucky, at the Oldham County Republican Party's Lincoln Day dinner, Republican Congressman Thomas Massie was speaking when Kentucky House Speaker David Osborne literally snatched the microphone out of Massie's hands mid-speech. That's not rumor. It's been reported, and video circulated widely. And in that clip you can hear a line that sums up the MAGA era perfectly. Someone shouts, "Welcome to the snake pit, baby." That's not unity. That's a party eating its own because someone dared to talk about what they're not supposed to talk about. Why would Massie be targeted? Because Massie has been publicly tied to the push for Epstein file transparency, including procedural moves in Congress connected to forcing action, and he's been vocal about objections to redactions and withholding. In other words, he's not staying obedient, and obedience is the only principle Trumpism has left. So picture the scene. A sitting member of Congress, in a room full of his own party's people, gets physically cut off while speaking. That's not democracy. That's control. That's what happens when the subject matter is radioactive, and Donald Trump's orbit doesn't want the conversation to happen, especially not in front of Republican voters. Now, while microphones are getting ripped away and documents are getting deleted, we're also learning more about the redaction machine. Major reporting has described frantic, large-scale redaction efforts around the Epstein materials, and the public debate is still raging over what is being hidden and why. The core accusation from critics is simple. The government is using redaction like a chainsaw, and the results look less like privacy protection and more like power protection. And here's the thing. If the system truly wanted transparency, it wouldn't be playing whack-a-mole with its own public document library. Yet we've already seen documented cases of Epstein-related files being posted and then disappearing. That's the opposite of confidence. That's panic. But the cover-up energy doesn't stop at Epstein, because in the same 24 to 48-hour window described in the original story you gave me, there's another scandal that reeks of federal interference. The killing of Renee Good in Minneapolis, and the reported pressure campaign to steer investigations away from civil rights accountability and toward blaming her widow. Multiple credible outlets have reported a wave of resignations among federal prosecutors in Minnesota tied to Justice Department. Pressure around the Renee Good case and legal analysis and reporting have pointed to serious questions about whether a full, credible investigation was allowed to proceed. FBI agents with a signed warrant were prepared to document blood spatter and bullet holes in Renee Good's SUV, then were ordered to stop from the top because the results could contradict Trump's public claim that Good violently, willfully, and maliciously ran over an ICE officer. I can't personally verify every word of that specific description from the sources I pulled today, but the bigger structure, political pressure, a refusal to pursue the customary civil rights inquiry, resignations by prosecutors, and public controversy over the government's handling of the case is supported by substantial reporting and analysis. And when prosecutors start walking out, when an office bleeds experienced attorneys because leadership is forcing a predetermined outcome, that's a siren. That's not normal. That's the justice system being bent into a propaganda tool. Now bring it back to Epstein, because Epstein is where Trump world is most exposed, not just morally but politically. Only a partial release has been made public, with millions of pages still unproduced, potentially 3 million documents, and far more pages, and that the missing category includes the internal memos, deliberative communications, and victim interviews you'd expect in a serious archive. The public record does confirm the rollout has involved millions of documents, intense controversy, and ongoing fights over what remains withheld or obscured. It also matches the public reporting that the 86-page prosecution memo was part of the disclosed universe, and that it dealt with potential co-conspirators after Epstein's death, meaning the government had a post-arrest, post-death lane to pursue other people and at minimum discussed it internally. That fact alone destroys the lazy talking point that it was only Epstein. If the memo exists, then the government itself was analyzing other possible criminal liability. And then it gets darker. The memo reportedly includes broad redactions pages where the names of co-conspirators are blacked out. That mirrors the broader criticism that redactions in the new Epstein releases have been sweeping, confusing, and sometimes seemingly disconnected from protecting victims. So here's the logic any honest adult can follow. If this is truly about protecting survivors, then redact identifying details of victims and minors. Fine. But why redact officials' names? Why redact analytical sections about charging decisions? Why make huge portions unreadable? And why in documented cases did files vanish after being posted? That's the question Trump's DOJ doesn't want asked. Now let's address the Ghislaine Maxwell piece. The story describes Maxwell being set for a congressional deposition, allegedly after interacting with top DOJ leadership and then planning to invoke the Fifth. Public reporting does confirm that Maxwell has been involved in ongoing political and legal maneuvering, and that congressional interest in her testimony has intensified amid renewed pressure around Epstein materials. Whether she answers or pleads the Fifth, the political reality is obvious. The public wants names, networks, and accountability, and the people who benefited from silence want the opposite. And then there are the kinds of Epstein emails and messages that make you feel like you need to scrub your brain afterward, like the original text's reference to a message saying, "Is she too old for you? I will hunt my other Czech friends," and the reference to an image that appeared to be of a child. I'm not going to repeat or embellish anything graphic here. What I will say is that mainstream reporting has been explicit that Epstein-related files contain a horrifying volume of sexual exploitation material, and that handling redaction and release requires strict care to protect victims and prevent further harm. That's exactly why the public deserves competent, transparent governance, not chaotic drops, sloppy privacy failures, and disappearing files. And while we're talking about standards of behavior, your original story brings up that 2017 email hoax targeting Mark Carney, then governor of the Bank of England, where the prankster tried to bait him into sleazy talk about dashing bar ladies and crystal glasses, and Carney shut it down with a crisp response. Not appropriate at all. That email exchange is well documented in mainstream outlets. The point is simple. When someone tries to drag you into grossness, there are two types of people, those who shut it down and those who swim in it. Now let's say the quiet part out loud about Trump. Donald Trump has spent years orbiting scandals like a planet made of grease. Every time something ugly surfaces, the response is the same. Deny, attack, distract, and bully. And now the administration connected to him is dealing with the single most toxic archive imaginable, Epstein, and the public is watching documents appear, disappear, and reappear through outside preservation efforts. Think about what that means, and that's why Trump looks like he's panicking. Because if this were harmless, nobody would be grabbing microphones from members of their own party in Kentucky. Nobody would be presiding over a document library where files disappear after posting. Nobody would need to hide behind oceans of redactions while insisting everything is totally fine. Here's what I want you to do next, because this part matters. Don't let this become another doom scroll story that fades by next week. Save what you can. Read the reporting from multiple outlets. Compare what the government posts today to what's still there tomorrow. And when you see the pattern deletes, redactions, intimidation, call it what it is, a system protecting itself. Trump doesn't fear witch hunts. He fears receipts. If you've listened this far, and you're thinking, this will blow over, that's exactly what they're counting on. Your silence is their shield. Your apathy is their eraser. So here's us final call. Spread this story. Ask questions everywhere. Comment sections, social media, town halls, and directly to the people who claim to represent you. Force them to answer. Force them to open the files. Force transparency. We don't ask for your trust. We earn it by laying the receipts on the table and letting you decide what stinks. And tonight, tonight we've got the kind of stink you can smell through the screen. Go to sleep, Donald. Seriously. It's not going to get much better for you. Because while normal, people are asleep at 1 a.m., Donald Trump is out here ranting and raving like a lunatic online. Wide awake, spiraling doom, scrolling his own ego like it's a life support machine. What's he posting at 1 a.m.? Weird polls. Rasmussen-style numbers, trying to claim his immigration policies are better than former President Biden's. And yeah, Donald, I'm sure we're all supposed to bow down to whatever cherry-picked poll makes you feel warm and fuzzy at midnight. There's even fresh coverage floating around right now about polling that says a majority prefers Trump's approach on immigration over Biden's, which is exactly the kind of headline Trump loves to cling to like a security blanket. But here's what he doesn't say when he's pounding the post button at 1 a.m. Other polls are showing voters don't think he's outperforming Biden overall, and some are saying the opposite. And that's the part that keeps him awake. Biden is still living rent-free in his head. At 1 o'clock a.m., the man acts like he's fighting a ghost in a mirror. He can't move on, because the only fuel he has is grievance complaint, as a personality resentment, as a bedtime story. He's not governing in his mind. He's competing in his mind, and he's losing control of the narrative, which is basically his kryptonite. Now let's talk about something even uglier, because while Trump is melting down online, he's also blasting out emails to supporters that feel less like campaign outreach and more like a late-night infomercial scam with a red hat on it. I'm going to paraphrase the vibe, because you've probably seen versions of this yourself. Respectfully, do you still love me? Message from the 47th POTUS. He says he might be overthinking things. Then he drops this painfully cringe line. My love language is MAGA. He claims he needs to confirm one last thing before he hits the hay. Then it's, do me a favor. Take my poll, and please don't forget to answer question number 2. I miss you. He begs for 30 seconds of your time, says there are final 12 hours to take the poll. And then boom, click the link, and suddenly you're being funneled into paying thousands of dollars. And if you click the wrong box, like the kind of box that looks like, I've read everything, you can get nudged into doubling it and making it recurring. That's not movement building. That's manipulative design. That's monetizing loneliness. That's emotional blackmail, dressed up as patriotism. Call it what it is, scamming supporters in general, especially older supporters, who are more vulnerable to these kinds of tactics. It's the politics of a pickpocket. Keep them mad, keep them scared, keep them clicking. And if you want to understand why he's up at 1 a.m. acting like his phone is on fire, here's where it gets darker. The Epstein files. There's been a major new wave of government file releases related to Jeffrey Epstein. Millions of pages posted by the Department of Justice under what's being framed as a transparency push. And these releases have renewed scrutiny around who Epstein was connected to, what investigators knew, and what went wrong the night Epstein died in custody on August 10, 2019. Now listen carefully, because this is where people get sloppy and start turning everything into a certainty. I'm not here to do that. I'm not here to tell you I've solved a mystery with vibes. What I am here to do is point at the parts that are documented, the parts that are reported, and the parts that raise legitimate questions, especially when those questions keep circling back to the same name, Donald Trump. In the original chatter, people are throwing around wild claims like 38,000 references to Trump. In the Epstein files, more references to Donald than Harry in a Harry Potter book, more than Jesus in the Bible. Is that exact number verified? I'm not going to pretend it is, but the larger point is real. The newest Epstein-related releases are reigniting public focus on Epstein's ties to the powerful and famous, exactly the kind of spotlight Trump hates. And then there's the death itself, officially ruled a suicide. Yet scrutiny has never stopped, and the Justice Department's own watchdog has previously documented a cocktail of negligence and misconduct at the jail protocol failures, staffing problems, camera issues, and falsified records. Here are the details that are blowing the door open again. 1. The orange figure. Newly discussed material includes references to a surveillance image showing an orange-colored figure moving toward the tier where Epstein was housed on the night he died. There's disagreement over whether it was an inmate, a guard, or someone carrying items, but the very fact that officials don't even agree on what the footage shows is a problem. 2. Missing or compromised footage. There's renewed reporting that key footage around the relevant time window is missing or otherwise compromised, another part of why the public distrust never died. 3 guards not doing what they were supposed to do and lying about it. This isn't internet rumor. It's in official statements. Correctional officers were charged for falsifying records relating to August 9 and 10 at the Metropolitan Correctional Center, the same period surrounding Epstein's death. 4. The noose/ligature confusion that people keep bringing up. The online narrative says they claimed a noose, but a noose was never recovered, and instead there's talk of an orange jumpsuit tied in a knot, and that the actual noose wasn't recovered. The public record around items and images is messy and fragmented, with references to makeshift ligatures and gaps in what's been publicly accounted for, so you can see why people seize on that ambiguity. 5. Nicholas Tartaglione, the inmate placed, with Epstein described in the original story as a quadruple murderer whose MO involved killing people connected to. The key detail in the original narrative is this. Tartaglione has filed a petition saying he wants Trump to pardon or commute his sentence, and he alleges he was moved next to Epstein to kill him, though he says he was taken out a few days before Epstein died. That petition and those allegations have been reported as part of the renewed Epstein file storm again. Allegations, but they're part of the record being discussed. And now the big finding that sent Trump's brain into orbit, a draft press release about Epstein's death that appears dated the day before Epstein actually died. Epstein died on Saturday, August 10, 2019. The claim is that Trump's DOJ prepared a draft statement on Friday, August 9th, before he died, saying Epstein was found unresponsive and pronounced dead, without initially including apparent suicide. Then the next day, the public-facing version included that extra phrase of an apparent suicide. The official DOJ/SDNY statement that includes the apparent suicide wording is publicly posted, and reporting tied to the newly released files highlights that a draft announcement is dated August 9, 2019, raising the obvious question: why was a death announcement drafted with that date before the death was discovered and announced? You don't need to be a conspiracy theorist to see why that's gasoline on a fire. You just need to be a person with a functioning brain. So yeah, Trump's up at 1 a.m. posting polls, and Biden bad memes because the Epstein storm is back, and it's circling the people at the top like sharks smelling blood in the water. And Trump is the guy who panics when he can't control the headline. But wait, there's more keeping him awake. Politics is shifting under his feet. Louisiana House District 60, Democrat Chastity Martinez just won the special primary outright on February 7, 2026. General election canceled, beating Republican Brad Daigle with 61.9% to 38.1%, 159 votes to 169. That's not a squeaker. That's a clean win. And here's why it matters. Trump carried that same district before. The original narrative says Trump carried it by 13 points, so Republicans thought it was their moment to flip it. Instead, Democrats held the seat and overperformed massively. If you're seeing that kind of overperformance, plus 20, plus 25, plus 31, plus 40, you're looking at the math of a coming wave. And no, I'm not declaring the future. I'm saying this is why Trump can't sleep. The ground is moving, and he's trying to nail his shoes to the floor. Then we pivot to Georgia, because the original story points to a speech from Democratic Senator Jon Ossoff, misspelled in the rant as Asaf and Oaf, but it's clearly Ossoff, calling out what MAGA has become. He goes after the so-called "don't tread on me" crowd, the people who pretend they're anti-authoritarian until the authoritarian is wearing their jersey. The core point. Now they're saying film federal officers, and you get threatened with being put on a terrorist watch list. They say officers don't have to identify themselves. They don't have to explain why you're stopped. Then the gut punch line aimed at MAGA hypocrisy: obey the federal government or die. And the original rant references a Republican congressman running for Senate in Texas saying, quote,
running for Senate in Texas
when a federal
said,
officer gives you instructions, you abide by them, and you get to keep your life. That quote is real, and it's been reported. It came from Representative Wesley Hunt during an interview about an ICE-related shooting case, and it encapsulates the new MAGA ethos. The government is tyranny. Unless it's their government, then it's comply or else. Then Ossoff drops the line. That should be tattooed across every forehead, pretending MAGA is for the working class. Turns out they're for the Epstein class. The original story calls it nailed it. And the broader framing MAGA as a government of by and for the ultra-rich tracks, with the criticism Ossoff has made in speeches and clips about corruption and elites. And the rant keeps going, prices up, jobs going away, Medicaid and school lunches slashed, nursing homes defunded. It mocks the Steve Bannon pitch of forgotten man and woman, saying Trump's actually closing rural clinics and hospitals to cut taxes for the rich. Then it throws out names like George Soros and Elon Musk in the same breath, which is incoherent on purpose. Because MAGA propaganda doesn't need consistency, it needs enemies. It says Trump was supposed to end the globalist world police foreign policy, yet here we are, war for oil, nation building, and even threatening to conquer Greenland. And that Greenland threat, that's not just a random punchline. Recent polling coverage in Europe has tied worsening views of the US to Trump's Greenland talk. And then there's the corruption money trail. The Global, a real estate fund, tied to Saudi royals, new Trump deals in multiple countries, governments like Qatar and Oman investing too. This overlaps with public reporting about Trump Organization-branded real estate partnerships involving Dar Global and projects in the Gulf region, including Oman and Saudi-related developments. Finally, the line that's basically a scream in Trump's face. He doesn't just want money from foreign-linked deals, he wants money from the US government too. Because yes, Donald Trump has filed a $10 billion lawsuit against the IRS and Treasury tied to the leak of his tax information, raising conflict of interest questions because he's the sitting president, while suing agencies under the executive branch. The original rant calls it stealing, and whether you label it damages or grift, the demand is still $10 billion, your tax system, your government, dragged into his personal payout fantasy. So zoom out with me. At 1:00 a.m., Trump is posting polls to self-soothe. He's begging supporters, do you still love me? Like a manipulative ex who also wants your credit card number. He's panicking while Epstein files resurface, while contradictions around Epstein's jail death draft statements, missing footage questions, falsified records ignite, the public's suspicion again. Meanwhile, Democrats are overperforming. In elections like Louisiana HD60, and senators like Ossoff are hammering the MAGA brand for being a costume. Don't tread on me on the flag. Obey or die in the mouth. That's why he can't sleep. Because the horrors are being uncovered, piece by piece, and he knows he can't bully the internet into forgetting once it decides to remember. If you're watching this, and you're tired of being gaslit by late-night propaganda and scammy emails, don't just scroll to the next distraction. Share this, talk about it, and stay loud. We are anonymous. We are legion. We do not forgive. We do not forget.